Good day. Thank you for having me here. Of course, I know we need to establish what went on that day. I understand. Maybe I could tell you a story to help you understand. Yeah, I think I'll tell you a story. The waves lapped the shore of Manhattan Island, much the way they have since the beginning of our recorded time. There were times when the waters were clearer. You could see much further down like you were looking at the bottom of a well. I'd like to think sometimes that being able to see the bottom of the well is good and a clear image. But sometimes what's down there, you don't want to know. You just don't want to see it. The cult of Cthulhu led us to Central Park. They had already accomplished their deed. In the bright blood-red moon of the night, they made an arcane summoning complete. We got there too late. These things happen. They happen. We try, but sometimes we arrive too late. Cthulhu was rising from the ocean depths. Soon he would cross into the Atlantic and proceed up the eastern coast to New York. I must impress upon you that this wasn't going to be easy to stop him. No. In the past, we stopped him through science. With the inception of his corporeal form, his physical body, we were able to stop him and put him back to sleep. We always knew it would only be a stopgap measure. And the day of his arrival has come. I speak in the present tense because I want to take you back to that day. How were we going to stop him? The nuclear option was out. It would cause millions and millions of deaths immediately. The East Coast being so populated, you couldn't even bomb just New York City without destroying all the cities around it. It just wasn't feasible. Fallout would just, the casualties, the nuclear option was off the table. The only thing we had, and I know this is hard to believe, was to do a summoning of our own, using the tingle stone and amplifying it with the searchlights, scanning the sky for the Dark Lord, we were able to post a signal to draw in the giants that lurk around the world. The tingle stone sent out a wave of light energy that had a sonic element to it. I can't describe it, but you could almost hear it. Like a dog whistle. Yes, like a dog whistle. And soon we were getting reports in, and they were coming fast. Outside New York, near upstate, giant flying creatures were beginning to descend upon the Buffalo area. A giant primate was lumbering across the Pennsylvania forest. And in the harbor itself, our first invader came. A giant lizard, dinosaur, I don't know what it is, but he was massive. The largest creature I have ever seen. They call him Godzilla. The god lizard. I was stunned by his shape, stunned by his size. My mind immediately trying to figure out the calculations for him to breathe and respirate. An impossibility. How could he live? How could he breathe? How could he walk and not be crushed by his own weight? I was dumbfounded. He was much, much bigger than the creature from 20,000 fathoms below the sea. This man could swallow a bus, where that creature could barely swallow a person. I don't know what the right word is. Do you even know? Do you even know what the right word is? How do you stop an unstoppable force? You find an immovable object. I couldn't think of a better candidate than looking upon the roar of Godzilla standing by the Brooklyn Bridge. We evacuated most of uptown near the harbor. It's always funny, isn't it? Uptown. It's on the lower side of the island. You would think it would be uptown. I sure hope I'm right. Or we just evacuated the wrong part of the town. After 9/11, New York City was more of a town. Neighborhoods. People who actually stopped and cared and helped each other. Now they were facing another horror, another nightmare, possibly Armageddon. But I wasn't so sure I would give up on this planet, and I never was much into end times. As long as we live, as long as there's hope, there's time. And we were going to use that time wisely to save the planet. Now, we only have minutes. You see, Cthulhu is a magical creature as much as a physical creature. His size, greater than a battleship, standing on two legs, his vestigial wings and his tentacles, his frightening visage. He is quite remarkable and alien, and that's because he is an alien. And he would terraform this planet before he would rule this planet. Through terraforming, changing the atmosphere, changing the makeup of the water, the salinity of the water, the makeup of the air, water, poisoning the land, he would make the planet more acceptable for his kind. And he could wait forever for this chance to do this deed. What you must understand is within minutes of him arriving, we knew he was there, even before he rose from the harbor. A massive die-off of fish, animals in the zoo going insane, erupting from their cages with adrenaline and strength unheard of, everything trying to escape. He was here. I looked with my binoculars across the cityscape, and I could see the evacuation was going well. And I could also see the generals had assembled. They were making a war plan. Godzilla was now talking to a giant primate, the one they call King Kong. Though smaller, he carried a grace and dignity. He earned his name King, and he stood there gracefully, the most beautiful humanoid object I've ever seen. He stood there, and they spoke silently to each other, as all generals do, eyeing each other up, sizing themselves up, looking themselves over, building a bond of trust. I don't attack you. You don't attack me. And soon they were joined by a third general, a giant pterodon, his wings so powerful that buildings were collapsing as he landed around them. They called him Rodan, and Rodan closed his wings and spoke to both of them. He made some guttural, ancient sounds from his own language, and then he bowed his head. He bowed his head. And all three listened. He wasn't bowing to them. He was listening. They were listening for him, the Dark Lord, and he had arrived. We couldn't see him yet. He was still beneath the waves, but they knew. What I took for an honorable bow was Rodan letting them know he's here. He opened his wings and flew to the north, where the other flying creatures had gathered. It was obvious they had developed some sort of plan of attack. Godzilla and King Kong squared off at the harbor's edge, just in time to see a mass of octopus-like tentacles pierce the air. The Dark Lord rising in the harbor, rising, I say, and as he rose the water turned black beneath him and around him, poisoning the water just by his presence, poisoning the air, the sun turning red in blood dripping from it. The sky started to change from our crystal blue ball of hope and joy and oxygen to one of red death. The red death, the mask of the red death was upon us, and the great Lord was bringing this pestilence with him. I was stunned by how quickly things were changing. Thank God we had time to evacuate those below. Everything was collapsing on the shore. He was making the waves come in with tidal force. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Not a tsunami, just the water itself, repulsed by the poisoning of him around it, was thrusting itself onto the land to escape him. The very water, the very air around him, repulsed by the evil that they were being exposed to. But slowly, the waves slid back into the dark, dark black waters and were absorbed, corrupted, turned, made undead, made unclean. And as the blackness spread and the red spread, I truly feared for my fate and the fate of my planet. Could we survive this? I don't know. It all happened rather quickly. I must impress upon you, this was a fight between titans, the giants, the Nephilim of our legends. Godzilla led the attack with his atomic fire breath, but it seemed to be able to fend it off. Cthulhu was striking back, cutting deep, cutting them with his clawed hands. He was actually pushing them back. He was actually sucking the life away from them. You could see it in every blow. And King Kong, using the buildings around him, landing blow after blow, strike after strike, hitting Cthulhu with so much force that buildings and windows around him were exploding from the repercussions. The force of every strike, an atomic bomb going off. I've never seen this kind of power I've never seen this. I've never seen this before. But they were being defeated. He was pushing them back. I couldn't believe my eyes. They weren't even softening him up. It was almost as if he knew he had the upper hand and was striking at will and striking deep into them, his claws penetrating through their armor, through their skin, through the fur around their bodies, tearing away flesh, tearing away muscle. I suddenly realized a train full of passengers blasting its horn in the middle of the fight. The train's engineer blasting away with his whistle, hoping to escape the attack before the track was destroyed. Cthulhu zoned in on it. And then I noticed. Both creatures noticed too. They actually cared about the people. King Kong charged like a football tackler and hit Cthulhu low around the waist. Godzilla slashed with his tail and pushed Cthulhu back. He knew they were trying to stop him, so he picked up and threw King Kong aside and charged towards the train. Godzilla with all his might slammed forward, barely missing destruction of the track with his own body, and a standoff, a stalemate, broke out. Godzilla, both hands gripping Cthulhu, both gods standing before me as I looked from a far-off building, my goggles cracking from the vibrations that were slamming at the building I was standing on, the bricks collapsing under my feet. I was almost in an untenable situation where I was going to fall to the ground below. But these titans kept slamming each other, and I couldn't tear my eyes from the fight. I couldn't not look. I just couldn't take my eyes away. And that's when it happened. That's when it happened. Godzilla, with all his might, got the upper hand and cast Cthulhu back towards the shore. He bought the train time, and it slid right between the battlefield into safety. Like a little tiny snake sliding away into the grass, it disappeared between the buildings. Godzilla let out a roar. Kong, now on top of a building nearby, pounding his chest, they squared off to Cthulhu. They had pushed him back. The anger in the Dark Lord's face was visible, and he raised his arms, and Cthulhu let out a roar that made the blood squirt from my eyes, my ears, my mouth. The poison of his words, his voice, ancient spells, ancient evil, released upon my humanity. I felt my mind slipping. I felt like I was going insane. The only thing that kept me was my partner as I looked to my side, holding his ear, the blood trickling between his fingers, his other arm over his ear, but his arm outstretched, holding the tingle stone up, holding the tingle stone forward. I realized we were in a shield. We were behind a shield created by the tingle stone. That's why I was able to see everything I could see. That's why I was able to perceive everything I could perceive. That's why I wasn't fully insane. And that's why my head was barely bleeding and not exploded upon the ground like a busted coconut. Godzilla and King Kong bought time to launch a surprise attack, and it came from across the city. King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra descended from the air and attacked Cthulhu simultaneously with all their might. Their attacks were distance attacks, Ghidorah firing its poison electric breath, Rodan a sonic wave coming in behind him where he wasn't expecting it, and Mothra also attacking using its magic. And that's when I saw Cthulhu cringe, his whole body shudder. That was the weakness. Mothra was the weakness. Mothra was a magical creature as much as a physical creature. Mothra was worshipped. Mothra had followers. He was a god to those people. And Mothra knew magic. They attacked relentlessly with all their might, all 5 creatures plowing into Cthulhu from every side, every direction, tearing him, ripping at him, shredding him, his wings tattered, full of holes, his tentacles damaged and broken, his arms were even bleeding. They were getting to him. They were actually killing him. But he seemed to be able to fend them off still. And you could see his poisonous attacks had taken their toll. King Kong had black blood spatches. I'm sorry. My mind. Where was I? My mind. Where was I? Oh, yes. I looked up. He did something to our minds. Cthulhu did something to my mind. I'm still there. I'm still there. And that's when I saw King Kong. The blood leaving his body dripping upon the ground, turning black. He had poisoned Kong, and he probably had poisoned Godzilla as well. Sooner or later these titans would die from the attacks, the cuts, the poisons injected in them by Cthulhu. Even a titan can die, and they knew that too, so it was a matter of time. But this time, the Titans had the upper hand. On their side, time was a benefactor, and that's when Mothra swept in from behind. He made a quick attack with his webbing, the magical webs sweeping around Cthulhu, trapping him, rendering him immovable for just a few seconds, and then he was trapped. King Kong went in for the kill, every blow from his mighty arms striking with deadly force. You could hear all through the city the bones of Cthulhu cracking, ribs breaking. He snapped his arm. He buckled his leg. He cracked his neck. Cthulhu was being broken apart in pieces. Rodan slammed into him with all his might, both of his feet hitting Cthulhu so hard, the talons of his feet digging deep across the back of the monster, ripping his flesh asunder. And then they pulled back as quickly as they attacked. They pulled back to a safe distance. And then I saw it. King Kong roaring like the king he is, jumping to a safe point to watch himself. And he gave the signal, and the attack came. Godzilla let out the most massive fire-breathing attack I have ever seen. His radiation breath literally striking the damaged Cthulhu in his midsection. He destroyed him, bore a hole right through the center of his body. The blast exiting the back of Cthulhu, he cut a hole right through him. Ghidra let out a roar and opened some kind of portal with his laser breath, some kind of mystical portal. I can't even comprehend it, but suddenly all the black water, all the black blood, all the black flesh of the attack was getting lifted up off the ground into the sky. Ghidra's 3 heads opening a portal to space, to some other world, some other time, some other... I can't comprehend what I saw. The swirling hypnotic circles pulling Cthulhu up as Godzilla continued to strike him. His energy blast lifting Cthulhu up towards this hole in the sky, and soon, as quickly as it opened, the portal closed. And Cthulhu was gone. He was gone. The water began to turn blue again. That which did not go with Cthulhu turned blue again. Kong began to heal. A drop of blood falling close to me. I could see it was red again. The poison leaving their bodies rejecting the poison. I wouldn't call it a miracle. I would call it winning World War III. And we were on the right side. So I looked at the trains escaping the destruction, and I saw the people being led to safety. I turned back to see the monsters that we had brought there to protect us. They were already leaving, some by sea, some by air. Kong took one quick leap to the top of the Empire State Building, holding on with one arm and beating his chest with the other. It was a scene I'll never forget. And then he was off, down the side of the building and across the rooftops, following Godzilla out towards the south and back to their homes. I don't expect all of you to understand this story. I don't want you to understand how my mind is corrupted by what I saw. And I don't expect you to think that everything I saw was true. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. It's like a dream inside a dream inside a dream. I know all of this is... What was I talking about? What was I telling you? Oh, you want to know about the Battle of New York between Cthulhu and Godzilla and the other great titans. Well, I don't know where to begin. Maybe I could tell you a story. Maybe I could tell you a story about it. Maybe if I told you a story, you'd understand. I could make you understand. The waves were lapping the shore of Manhattan Island like they have done since the beginning of recorded time.